Like they're almost nose to nose. Nobody would be arguing at that distance. Like, yeah, just get over here. Let's just do the snake.
Just get over here.
Yeah.
You got a snake on your brain.
Yeah.
Oh,
how come nobody standing around them is like, guys, what's going on here? Are we talking about the race? Are we talking about fucking? What are we talking about?
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Chat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love and growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why do they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is a podcast for you, I'm one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roper. And alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Chappy Lyons.
Don't come on me, Dad.
And each week we take a look back and decide if our favorite films hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes at the end of the podcast. The three of us will provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and right now, Watchmen. Right now, Watchmen. That being said, Big D, we've got a lot of commissions. People pay us sometimes to get to the front of the line and watch a movie. Sometimes it's for a special anniversary or birthday or bar mitzvah. And I think that's the reason we're doing the movie we're doing this episode.
We are, and we've done movies before that have won Academy Awards that are, renowned for their excellence. Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction, movies that people love, that are great movies. Nothing got the outcry of just pure joy on Twitter and Facebook than finding out what movie we were doing today. I did a screenshot of it, and immediately 15 people wrote in, I remember this movie. I love this movie. I grew up watching this. It's terrible, but I love it. So we could do some movies that have great acclaim or movies like this, and the people seem to love it. So this one was a special gift from a wonderful wife, from Marisa, to her husband. And she wanted to see the 1986 gung-ho American patriotic military flick, Iron Eagle.
Yeah, and a lot of times, one of the things we ask for is if you're going to spend money here at Shat the Movies, if you're going to send in your hard-earned freedom bucks, we want to know why. And in this particular case, it was the wife, Marisa, explaining why she spent 100 eagles for us to review this movie.
That's right, Raj. American Wife of the Year, Marisa, writes in, "Hey guys, as my husband Greg's birthday approaches in October, I found myself in the familiar spot of not having a clue what to get for him. I start off with really good intentions every year of coming up with something amazing and thoughtful, and he usually ends up with a $100 Dick's gift card. He has been a huge fan of your podcast and mentioned one day that you can commission a review of a film when I started spouting off all the movies I loved growing up. But rather than spend the money to have you review The Great Outdoors or Clue, feel free to review those anytime, I would love it if you could review one of his favorites from the 80s, Iron Eagle. I admit, I don't think I've ever watched this movie from start to finish, but if it's ever on TV, you can bet Greg is watching it. He doesn't even care if it's on Univision channel and he's watching it in Spanish. And for some reason, it seems to be on that channel a lot. I get the appeal of the movie. It's very Top Gun-ish with the cool jet scenes and also has the teen rebellion and some great music. But I didn't really know why he loved it so much. So as I stealthily tried to bring it up out of the blue this past weekend and asked why he liked it so much, I got the response of, "What do you mean? It's awesome." So there you have it. Nothing profound, just a true love of an 80s movie that does not get kind reviews online. We've been watching the Cobra Kai series, and there have been references to the movie in both seasons. So I know Greg isn't alone in his love for this movie. And hopefully there are some other fans out there that will be happy to hear you discuss this too. Thanks again for helping me score some points on a surprise birthday gift and for keeping us entertained on our drives. Best regards, Marisa.
You guys, this is, I think, Iron Eagle and Cobra Kai or Karate Kid almost have some similarities in that the 1980s was just chock full of these like teenage rebellious figures that would meet or interact somehow with an older man that would somehow groom them into something better than what they were. And I wonder if if it's now with a lot of bad reports coming out of Hollywood with pedophilia rings and whatnot, I wonder if maybe there was some meta, like maybe some screenwriters were trying to tell us something.
I mean, look, let's not tarnish people's childhoods like that. I think, but there was this like phenomenon of like the super teen. Like there's always like the kid who just has a bizarre virtuoso talent for whatever the thing is that they're trying to do. And what I love is like Marisa, again, wife of the year. Like Marissa's letter gives me hope that I might someday find someone that understands me the way that she understands Greg.
Because a lot of times the kids come from like broken homes or like their father died, and like you fit right in that category, right? Like where, you know, your father passed away at a young age. You were kind of a latchkey kid. You know, you moved from state to state trying to like, where was the older janitor in your apartment complex that groomed you into becoming the Krav Maga fighter that you are today?
Yeah, I didn't really have a janitor sensei. There was a guy named Ken who gave all the kids in the apartment complex at Hermosa Green free candy. And after like 3 weeks of him doing that, my mom told me, don't go to Ken's house anymore. And I never understood why. But now as an adult, I think I get it.
I mean, Mr. Miyagi, the worst thing he did was have a young boy down into his boiler room shed, trimming some trees and fixing bicycles. Chappy, he's got some dialogue that we'll get into that if you just read it in court, Chappy's going to jail. So I think this will be good to get into.
Mr. Miyagi basically had Daniel as his personal manservant.
Yeah, and both of them took them into highly adult situations with alcohol. I just want to point that out. Fucking Chappy's like, yeah, let's go to the bar. Miyagi's like, listen, let's get drunk and sing sonnets to my dead wife. Cool.
Yeah. Well, Iron Eagle is a 1986 American-Canadian military action film starring Jason Gedrick and Louis Gossett Jr. While it received mixed reviews, being unfavorably compared to the similarly themed Top Gun released the same year, the film earned $24 million against an $18 million budget at the U.S. box office. Iron Eagle was followed by 3 sequels, Iron Eagle 2, Aces, Iron Eagle 3, and Iron Eagle on the Attack, with Louis Gossett Jr. being the only actor to have appeared in all 4 films. The basis of the fictional story in the film relates to real-life attacks by the United States against Libya over the Gulf of Sidra, in particular the 1981 Gulf of Sidra incident. Louis Gossett Jr. is currently starring in the HBO series Watchmen, which is what we're doing over at Shat on TV right now. Before we begin the podcast, we always start with the question, where were you? What are your memories the first time you watched Iron Eagle? We'll start with you, Big D.
Well, I feel myself expertly qualified to talk about this movie. Growing up, my favorite toy was the G.I. Joe F-14 Sky Striker with Ace. I had, of course, the video game for Top Gun. I even had a bootleg version of Afterburner for the NES that wasn't meant to be ported over. I spent hundreds of hours in this game, like the simulator, trying to do the fucking midair refueling. So I'm familiar with how hard it was for Doug. But you know what? I loved this movie. I don't know why. Top Gun came out, I think, maybe a month or two after this. And that was more real. But for me as a kid who liked to play with G.I. Joes, who liked to envision myself saving, my dad or some patriot, this movie just spoke to me. It's not the movie that Top Gun is, but I almost love it more.
I think I told the story when we reviewed Top Gun, but I grew up on Breezeway Court in Jacksonville, Florida, in the lovely suburb of Mandarin, which is on the south side. And Jacksonville was and still is home to 2 naval bases. You have the Naval Air Station Jacksonville and the Naval Station Mayport. And one of my friends that I grew up on Breezeway Court with, Brian C., I think I've talked about this before, his dad was in the Navy. So his family was like huge into Navy and military films. And they also had the largest bootlegged library of recorded movies I've ever experienced or come across in my life, because this was at the time when VHS movies, it wasn't like you could go down to your Walmart or your local Best Buy and just buy movies, right? They were very expensive. There was at the time this feud going on between VHS and Betamax, like which version would become the standard, which then made buying home movies affordable. So at the time, you had to go buy blank video cassettes, wait for the movie to come on HBO, and then record it. Well, I guess maybe it is because of his naval training that he was so organized. They had an entire like cabinet of video cassettes, and they were detailed. He had like an entire card catalog of all these movies. It was crazy. It was awesome. But that's where I watched a lot of my movies, was over at his house, because he lived across the street. My parents wouldn't let me go past the fifth mailbox down the street. So this is where I got a lot of my like Top Gun. And I remember watching Iron Eagle over there because Brian also had a lot of G.I. Joes, and he worshipped dumb movies like Iron Eagle. And I'm not sure, looking back on it, because as I was watching this, none of these scenes made sense to me. None of them jogged any kind of memory. And that was really a first for me. So I wonder if it was that we watched Iron Eagle 2, which I think is considered the best of all the Iron Eagle movies, I think. But yeah, I don't remember this movie at all. I don't remember, even though I remember Iron Eagle as a franchise. I don't think I've ever watched this movie.
Yeah, Roger, we've talked about the Mandela effect before with movies, and I thought I'd seen this movie. So when it came up that we were doing it and Big D let me know, I was like, sweet, Iron Eagle. I remember that. The helicopters, Louis Gossett Jr. Surprisingly, no helicopters in this movie. I was completely lost. I'm like, so when did they get in the helicopters? Which, when you're trying to rescue somebody off the ground in Bilia, that makes sense that you would use a fucking helicopter, not a jet, which is not a really good rescue vehicle. So I put it out on Twitter. I was like, guys, what the fuck? I thought I'd seen this. What was the one with helicopters? And people were like, Airwolf. I was like, no, that was a TV show. They're like, well, there's an Airwolf movie. I'm like, no, it wasn't that. They're like, Firebirds? I was like, no, not fucking Firebirds. I swear there was a movie with Louis Gossett Jr. and helicopters. And I just want everybody to know that it's never too late. Like, we can still make this movie.
Well, Roger thinks I'm gaslighting the audience, but I want to just make two suggestions to our audience. If you love this movie, Firefox with Clint Eastwood. He's an American pilot. He goes into Russia, and it's a steal like their SR-71 Blackbird. That one, or Blue Thunder, where it might be the one you're thinking of, Gene, where it's the police helicopter, or maybe Enemy Mine, where Louis Gossett Jr. plays an alien. He was a pilot in that.
All three of those sound like Jenna Jameson movies from 1993. Blue Thunder, fucking Flashpoint, Firefox,
Enemy Mine.
Well, with that being said, Big D, play the trailer.
Doug Masters. He's 18 years old. Raised on an airbase.
Are you out of your mind?
Born to fly. Living for the day he'll earn his wings. Suddenly, just when life was going great.
Doug, it's your dad. He's been shot down. Hey, buddy.
Davis, hey, it's okay.
Colonel, will you please just tell me what's going on?
Your country has been warned time and time again.
Because they claim a 200-mile limit. We only recognize 12. So when are they going in?
Reparation is our due.
Don't lie to me.
3 days. In 3 days, they're gonna hang him.
When the Pentagon is helpless.
We're doing all we can.
And Washington's hands are tied.
We make the laws in this country.
There's only one thing to do. And he'll do it with one of the toughest fighter pilots who ever lived, retired Colonel Chappy Sinclair.
You know, your dad understands a lot about people's dignity. That's the last kind of person in the world I want to see locked up in some stinking cage somewhere.
Do you think with the right plan, it'd be simple to go in and get him?
Probably.
What's going on?
Look, I'm telling you right now, I bet you can get a plane. Bingo, we're in.
Are you wide enough to get me a couple of pilots, too?
I've got 3 times as many hours on that simulator as most pilots flying Falcons on this base right now.
I'll test you out on some live targets.
He may know how to fly. Now he must learn how to fight.
Want you concentrate.
Yeah! All right, directly going!
Everyone told them to sit tight and wait.
Heat up from here on out.
For them, waiting time is over.
Okay?
They're going in against the clock. In a pair of borrowed F-16s.
Chappy, I hit it.
Now just worry about the pre-makes that got up. Climb! Climb!
Academy Award winner Louis Gossett Jr. Jason Gedrick, Iron Eagle.
Doug Masters, son of veteran U.S. Air Force pilot Colonel Ted Masters, is a hotshot civilian pilot hoping to follow in his father's footsteps. His hopes are dashed when he receives a notice of rejection from the Air Force Academy, and making matters worse is that the news of his father being shot down and captured by the fictional Arab state of Bilya while patrolling over the Mediterranean Sea. The Arab state's court finds Colonel Masters guilty of trespassing over its territory and sentences him to hang in 3 days.
So Top Gun starts off with an incident also over the Mediterranean, and they treat it like it's real world. They do everything they can not to cause an international incident. Ted Masters, he is fucking reckless. He makes Maverick look like he's Iceman. He didn't even ask for authorization. He just shoots down another country's aircraft over international airspace. He's clearly aggressive. He is responsible for getting the U.S. into some serious shit. And nobody even just says that.
What's funny is that the makers of this movie were more careful than Ted Masters was. They didn't even call it Libya. But fucking, let's talk about some laziness here on the part of the writing crew. They're like, all right, we don't want to call it Libya. It's too obvious. How about Bilya? That's cool.
Close enough.
Yeah. Also, our neighbors to the north, Nakada. And if you go south of here past the wall, it's Eximico. God bless the SUA. But like, I get that they don't want to target any real world countries, but I don't think Libya was fooled on this. And by the way, you mentioned the incident, Raj. There were actually two of them, one in 1981 and then another one in 1989, which I think maybe the US got the idea to do it again. But hilariously, I was doing some research on the Gulf of Sidra incident, and there were two. I thought I was mistaken. I was like, wait, was it in 1981 or 1989? No, two of them. In both cases, U.S. F-14s were up in the air off a carrier and shot down Russian-made Libyan planes. And then like 8 years later, they did it again. The same exact numbers, two F-14s. It's like, hey, guys, maybe just don't fly around us. We're Americans.
Do you think maybe we could have had some footage of that? I understand the budget of this movie was not Top Gun, but it is so bad. Anytime there's a dogfight, you can see some standard B-roll from the distance. And when it explodes, you can see that it's like a wood plane hanging on a string. There's no forward motion. The piece doesn't come out. There's no fireball. This is far from believable air combat. It is comically bad.
Well, so to try and explain this, the bad dogfights, and again, I thought, well, at least we'll be getting some sort of aerial footage combat, and this will be at least somewhat 1980s fun. But it goes, they're in the cockpit. There's some sort of like LED readout that is trying to explain what is happening, and then it goes from that to an exterior of them shooting guns or firing missiles. And then it shows the other plane just blowing up. Like there's no in between. There's no actual dogfighting that's displayed. It's just guns, blow up, LED readout.
Yeah, and that LED readout, like every American pilot should be dead because fighter pilots operate at like a breakneck pace with split-second decisions. Whoever thought it'd be a good idea to install like a single strip LED readout that slowly types messages to the pilot, like the thing's a fucking death trap. It's like danger. You are being targeted by missiles.
Yes. But what about also the background? Anytime there's a shot of the pilot and you can see the clouds flying by, the motion never matches what the plane is doing. So if the plane is diving, the background will be going left. If it's just shaking all the time, I was like, make it stop. Please make it stop. I'm going to puke.
Yeah. And it's sad because, like you said, Top Gun, I think, came out like 2 weeks later, which actually showed at least some sort of B-roll aerial combat, or at least they tried to get out there and like make it seem somewhat believable. But
yeah, this movie makes me feel bad about my rating of Top Gun. I was like, Top Gun's flight footage was fucking phenomenal compared to this. I was like, man, hats off to the entire crew that did Top Gun, because that was engaging. You believed it. I mean, you knew it wasn't the actual planes getting shot down, but it looked real.
But you know why? It's because they went to the Navy and they said, can we actually get your participation? They said, fuck yeah, great recruitment video. This will be fuck yeah, go America. When the producers of this came and said, well, we got a movie and it's about a teenager stealing a plane, they were like, fuck you. We're not helping you with this.
Yeah, they had to go to fucking Israel to shoot this shit.
All right, so the first part of this movie starts off with this international incident, and it turns out that the fighter pilot that is shot down has a son, and the son, I guess he's the leader of this group on base, but he's acting like he owns the base. Now, Big D, you've lived on base, right? You've lived on in your military career. Is it like this? Are there kids? Are there reckless teenagers that are stealing their dads, or they're driving around their dad's drop top Ford Mustang and, going off base and hanging out with their crew members with their leather jackets and getting in fights with bullies? Like, does all this really happen on base?
Thankfully, I never dealt with any kids, but the wives of some of the upper echelon of leadership, they would want to be addressed as the rank of their husband.
Shut up.
I swear.
Shut up.
You would look at them and be like, you didn't do anything to earn that. We're not going to call you that. And they would immediately, it was like tattletaling. They'd go rat and tell their husband, whether he was a general or a full bird colonel. Yeah, it's like that. So I imagine the kids, they're probably pretty bad like this.
Yeah, but being married to a military officer isn't all sunshine and rainbows, as you might think, dear listeners. I have a friend whose husband or ex-husband was a firefighter in the Air Force. And apparently the way that they do their shifts, they still do old school firefighter shifts where it's like 12-hour shifts or whatever. It was just a common thing where when your husband was on shift, another guy from the fire crew would come over and bang you. There was like active wife swapping, and it was considered like a failure on the part of the wife if she didn't participate.
So it was, in order to be part of the Air Force fire and rescue crew, your wife had to participate in the swapping, like for purposes of just being a wife or like sexual purposes. It's not like she would just come over and like
sexual purpose.
Okay, all right. So she was like,
cookies,
"Hey, we really need you to come over and cook dinner for us because my husband's away." Or vacuum.
It was just the companionship part, Raj. They would just have long conversations about taxes. Basically, so it was like, so say you, Big D, and I all did, let's say we did an 8-hour shift each, right? Uh-huh. So while Big D was at work, the two of us would be like, well, I'll go stop by Big D's house. And it was just considered, that's just normal.
No, okay. You're making it sound like this was planned. Like they had a PTA or family support group meeting and said, okay, this week I'm going to go with Gene's wife. No, I mean, that shit happens. Infidelity is rampant in the military. We could tell which units were either deployed or out in the field training by the wives that were in the clubs. So if you saw a wife in the club out there and she'd be hooking up, you knew her husband was deployed or in the field. It happens, but it's not planned like this. It's just, it's like you said, it's one of the terrible things about the job.
Well, that's something that I don't really fully understand, because it seems to me that people get married early when they join the service.
Yes.
It's like within their third week of boot camp, they're marrying their high school girlfriends, or they're getting hitched and they're trying to have kids so quickly. Now, is the infidelity a result of, week-long relationships then tying the knot so early, and like any relationship that's just going to cause infidelity? Or is it the fact that they're away for so long? Because it seems like the military wants to encourage and incentivizes you to get married, so you would have, like, I guess, higher raise, and maybe you can live on base, so you can prevent all this. But it seems like what it does is it has the adverse effect.
So I can boil this down with a couple simple generalizations. Usually people get married super early because of the financial benefits. If you're a private, if you're a specialist, you can get out of the barracks. They'll give you basic housing allowance and you can move out and you get to move into a house. The problem why infidelity is so rampant is because, yes, you're getting married super quick, but also the quality, let's just say, of the relationships on post you didn't meet someone over a couple years and then the relationship grew. It just happens. And it's kind of sad. I mean, divorce is rampant. And if you are in the service with a strong relationship and a partner you've been with for a while, it's even taxing on them. I mean, it's almost impossible to say to your husband or wife, hey, honey, I'll see you in a year. Love you. And come back and things will be the same.
Well, it seems as if Colonel Ted made some pretty good money, because while they're living on base, they seem to have all these toys. Yeah, they have 3 kids. It seems to be a pretty loving family. This kid, Doug, he's running around with this crew of, I guess, other fairly high up officers' kids. Like there's one that kind of looks like a young Roger Roper, like he looks like a young serial killer.
You fucking say Milo? Bullshit.
Yeah,
Milo is you. Milo is not me.
Yeah, that's what I said. Young Roger Roper.
Young Roger Roper.
Okay. I was so defensive. I'm sorry.
And they're running. They seem to be like, I guess, in the small town. It's never really fully explained, but I guess it's like a Southern California town. And this kid is a troublemaker, but I guess yet loved. But there's also like this band, I guess, of bullies that they're fighting with. Can you guys help me break that down? I don't really understand. So it's the Eagles Club versus the Dirt Bike Club. Like, what is going on here?
No, it's the usually. Well, you have a high school on base.
Okay.
So it's the local high school bullies are having problems with the kids from the Air Force school bullies, and they're trying to lure one of the girlfriends away. So yeah, they're accosting her. They're doing wheelies in the streets, and Doug acts like he's in the fucking Air Force. Doug hasn't done jack shit. He's reckless. I can understand why he doesn't get into the academy. He's looking to fight at the drop of a hat. If anything here, I'm almost siding with the local kids. I wanted to see Doug get his ass kicked.
What surprised me was the challenge that came up. So in every movie, you've got the challenge, right? The Karate Kid, it's the tournament. In this case, you've got the snake race. And I'm like, okay, so they're both going to race motorcycles? Like, no. I'm like, oh, so they're both going to race planes? Like, no. Like, wait, what the fuck is going on? It's an airplane against a motorcycle? How is this even a race? A motorcycle should never beat an airplane. And also, like you mentioned, Raj, like being well off, where the fuck is this kid getting a plane? And during the race, there's like a setup. It's like all the locals got a phone call, like, hey, everybody, gas up the planes. You guys hold up the finish line. Like everybody, and all the adults are like, yeah, I guess it makes sense. And then Doug shows up and he gets to his plane and there's a fucking complete stranger tinkering with the engine. He's like, seems okay. I guess so, this is all right.
But not only this, but like, I guess a kid in the neighborhood had just previously died doing the exact same thing that they're about to do.
Yeah. He just died. And Doug, Doug, you won the race. Congratulations. You get bragging rights. You just caused at least $100,000 worth of damage to that Cessna. You see it spewing oil. There's no oil pressure. I assume that's your dad's plane. Worst case scenario is you crash and die. Or maybe you take out your friends at the fucking finish line holding up the toilet paper fucking banner.
So I had to do some research into that. We like to be a very factual, fact-based, science-based, logical podcast. I was like, okay, could a motorcycle conceivably beat an airplane in a race? And so I looked into like the bottom speed of a Cessna to keep aloft. And so I started digging into a bunch of forums, and I found a forum of pilots discussing this scene. And they're like, yeah, if you look when they cross the finish line, the Cessna actually has its flaps down. It is going as slow as possible while still being in the air. So if he's trying to win, he wouldn't be doing that. But more importantly, all these guys are like, yeah, this is complete bullshit. This race scene is crap. This is the scene that inspired me to become a pilot. So it's like this dual effect where so many pilots love this, but it's also complete bullshit.
It's not only that Doug has his Cessna on the plane, but his other three friends also have access to Cessnas, and they're spotters. Like they need two planes in the air. And again, I love 80s movies because just looking back through the looking glass now, they're just ridiculously over stereotyped. Like stereotyped to the fact, like you almost feel like it's a satire or Hot Shots. Like this movie felt like Hot Shots to me a lot because one of in Doug's friends group, there's the unfortunate token black character. And he's like, and again, this
Whoa! Hold on.
This is
Gene. Whoa. Reggie was not a token black character. Reggie was integral. He was needed for the plot.
What I'm saying is like he's the only black friend in the school. He's the only one that they're watching dancing. It's him and Louis Gossett Jr. on base, and that's it.
True.
That's
true.
the only. Those are the two black characters. But then on top of that, they make him like. When they were first introduced to who's the character's name? What's the character? I forget the character. Reggie. When you first introduced to Reggie, what is Reggie doing? He's breakdancing. At the gas station. He's showing off his moves that he's going to be showing later. And then we're on the plane. He's like, oh, hey, that music is jamming. Dance on those rocks. Keep jamming to those tunes because you're zooming. That's Reggie. That's a real thing that Reggie says as they're going through the snake race. But I felt that there were some homosexual undertones to this as well, because like you don't see Doug fight the bully because Reggie and that other kid that's in every 80s movie are holding Doug back. Mm-hmm. But the bully's just like, just run the stake with me already. And Doug's like, you just got snake on your brain. You just got snake on my brain. You could almost hear like the other guy just like, just pin me down and kiss me already. You know what I mean? Like they're in tight pants, leather jackets. You just know that bully just wants to get kissed.
So normally I would say that you're thinking that because Reggie is played by Larry B. Scott, who was Lamar from Revenge of the Nerds. He is. You're right. In movies like this, the two rivals, they get so close. Like they're almost nose to nose. Nobody would be arguing at that distance. Like, yeah, just get over here. Let's just do the snake.
Just get over here.
Yeah.
Oh, you got snake on your brain.
Yeah. Oh, how come nobody standing around them is like, guys, what's going on here? Are we talking about the race? Are we talking about fucking? What are we talking about?
Well, Doug decides to rescue his father. He requests the help of Colonel Charles Chappy Sinclair, a Vietnam veteran pilot currently in the Air Force Reserve. Doug convinces Chappy that he can acquire an F-16 fighter for the mission, and to Doug's surprise, Chappy had already begun planning a rescue operation himself. The combined efforts of Chappy and Doug's team result in a meticulously planned mission and the procurement of 2 heavily armed F-16B jets, with Doug flying the second unit.
Okay, so I'm trying to get invested in this movie. They set up a pretty compelling storyline. You've got an American pilot. He's shot down. He's got 3 days to live before the billions kill him. You got to go in. You got to save him. This could be the making of a pretty good action flick, right? But everyone in the movie seems to not be taking it seriously at all. Like, everyone's carrying on like normal. They're going to a graduation and they're going out to dinner. They're dancing in the garage. Which, by the way, like Louis Gossett Jr.'s ass shaking, how is that not a GIF? That should be a meme. Like, we need to make that a thing.
Yeah.
But Chappie's fucking crazy. He's like, look, okay, let me set up all this food. This is how the mission's going to go. I'm like, guys, this is fucking life or death. Make me believe it. They're failing at every turn.
Okay, so part of storytelling 101, there's something called the ticking clock. It's a plot device they use when a story, you want to constrain time. There's a limited time for the protagonist to resolve some kind of conflict. In this, there is no rush. Gene, you're 100% correct. They're just taking their time. Doug and Chappy are acting like they have all the time in the world. No, there's no rush. Let's go jogging and let's go read some of the intel. No, I don't want to go to Slappy's juke joint that serves Italian food with you. No, I don't want to watch you shower, Chappy. Get out here. Let's do some recon.
They're going to Slappy's. They're doing some running. They go to the dumb clubhouse. Like, this is an American Air Force base. Like, and yes. I get that the Air Force, comparatively to the Marines, to the Navy, to the Army, the Air Force, Big D back me up on this, is like the most relaxed, I guess, yes. of the military services. They get all the cool shit. They get a lot of funding, and other military branches look down on the Air Force as a result of that. But the Air Force is typically the standards are higher to be in there, and I guess that results in some additional conveniences. But would there be a clubhouse full of video games and boom boxes and beanbag chairs allowed to just be where, you know, kids can convene and plan how they're going to sabotage the American military?
No, the fucking clubhouse is filled with contraband. It's filled with traffic signs from across the base. It's filled with lighting. That looks like it's like one of the bunkers they would use to store munitions. It's something you want to lock down. No, I don't imagine they'd be having a clubhouse out there in the middle of the secure site where they probably have some other weapons. But these kids, they don't give a shit. And remember, the Air Force, you can take your physical fitness test on a bicycle. So maybe this shit happens.
But I love the Cold War. I wonder if this was, this is supposedly the peacetime military, right? And there was not a lot of confidence in our American military. And I wonder if it's because the security at these bases were so lax. You allow these kids to have their contraband military base. As a teenager, you're just allowed to walk into secret military operational work into a situation room and just ask a colonel, hey, what the fuck is going on? And he'd be like, listen, don't tell anyone, but I'm going to come over here and I'm going to tell you the entire fucking plan. It's like that scene in War Games where they're taking the tour guides around, like where they house the nuclear console, and they're like, hey, who wants to play with the buttons? And then one of the guys plays with the buttons and he's like, oh my God, you just launched a birthday celebration. Happy birthday, Tony. Like, is that the way that it was?
Forget the fact that he's a teenager. He's wearing a tank top tucked into jeans with no belt. He stands out. No one's going to mistake him for someone on a tour, right?
Right.
And this is an Air Force base. Yes, it's still secure, but yet they're in California, and one of their schemes to, Ocean 11, I assume some weapons for this plane is they throw these long strips of firecrackers into the empty 50-gallon barrels, and all of the employees are jumping on the floor. They're acting like they're in the middle of Baghdad. What the fuck is going on? There's no way they're anticipating an automatic fire, somebody to assault the base, or are they?
I don't know. This was, so I'm listening to a whole. There was a 2-parter, 2-hour episode, actually a 3-hour episode of the Dollop. Do you guys know what the Dollop is? Have you ever heard of the Dollop podcast? The Dollop podcast is basically take a subject. It's 2 comedians. One knows and has researched an entire subject, and then the other guy and maybe a guest have no idea about the subject, and they just kind of riff on it.
So it's Shat the movies.
It's like Shat the history or whatever. But they did an entire 2-part series on Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan is looked at in some circles as like the savior of the 1980s. Like, he's the one that brought back the military and all this stuff. And I wonder if this was where some of that increased military budget went to Hollywood, because Ronnie was, and came from Hollywood. I wonder if he backdoor channeled some of these federal dollars to get movies like this made.
You're talking about cost and funneling some money.
Yeah.
For 1 hour of operational flight time, it is estimated to cost $7,000 to $22,000 for an F-16. They make it look like you just go up and be like, hey, can I borrow one of the F-16s? Yep, no problem. That's an $18 million jet. And his dad is going to risk his career, his sweet fucking house and family, to take his son Doug out flying. This does not seem to make sense.
No, they should all be going to jail. This is all treason. There's flashbacks of Ted taking Doug up against orders. Like, he's like, you don't understand. Like, if you doing those things in the air, they could get me fired. You shouldn't allow your son in the first place in the cockpit.
No.
And then Doug is skipping school. He's got some sort of agreement with the guy who runs the simulator. The only person that seems to have some sort of logical understanding of military protocol is also the one that is masterminding all this, which is Louis Gossett Jr.
Right. Louis Gossett Jr. First of all, I want to apologize to anybody who listens to our Shat on TV Watchmen podcast, where Roger and I called into question the acting chops of Louis Gossett Jr. One of our listeners on YouTube, Lock121, wrote in and said, Louis Gossett Jr. is a great actor. He was in Roots and other great movies. Iron Eagle was a terribly great movie and not an example of his best acting. Louis was basically the Denzel of his time. Listen, I've seen Denzel. I've seen Louis Gossett Jr. Denzel does not have noodle arms. Denzel doesn't need to take his sunglasses on and off to prove a point. The only part of Louis Gossett Jr.'s performance, which apparently is supposed to be legendary for this movie, that I thought was even remotely good, is there's one part on the tarmac where he gets pissed off. Like, he's on the runway and he starts to lose his shit, and his mad's legit, but then he ruins it by phrasing things so strangely, like, don't come on me, Dad, and why don't you go see what my pillow in bed is doing? You're lucky I'm not in the cockpit. I'd show you touchy.
Chappy also says, get your butt in my trailer now. And Chappy also says, God doesn't give you things he doesn't want you to use. You've got the touch, boy. So I don't know if Chappy was trying to fuck him or train him to go on this mission.
Yeah. On the day of Colonel Masters' scheduled execution, Doug and Chappy fly into Billion airspace. The Billion military responds, and in the ensuing battle, Doug and Chappy take out 3 MiG-23 fighters and destroy an airfield, with Chappy's plane being hit by anti-aircraft fire. He tells Doug to climb to a high altitude and play the tape he made for him the night before. Then Doug listens as Chappy's fighter goes down. Chappy's recorded voice gives Doug encouragement and details the help he will need to complete the mission and rescue his father. Making the enemy believe he is leading a squadron, Doug threatens the enemy state into releasing his father for pickup. But can an F-16 really do this, Big D? You're telling me they're going to fly all the way from California to where apparently Libya and Syria are? Like, if you looked at a map, like, and I imagine the fuel range on these F-16 fighters aren't very great. And refueling in midair, you mentioned the Nintendo game Top Gun. One of the toughest missions in that game is the refueling.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Where you got to line up.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way a kid who's only trained, let's say he's trained 80 hours in a simulator. How many training simulations do you think he's done on refueling?
He's got the touch.
Oh, he's got the...
You know what? You got to go with it. You got an 18-year-old with a mullet sneaking onto a base, pretending he's a pilot and stealing 2 fully armed F-16s. Whether or not the fuel economy matches, that's the least of my concern.
Yeah, but the other thing that doesn't match is we talked about like that, how it'll go from cockpit to guns to explosion. Again, I imagine they're 50 caliber rounds that are at least coming out of an F-16, right? But is it going to cause the kind of explosions that we see on screen?
I think they're 30 caliber, but this is the commando effect. Everything you shoot acts like it's a giant 50-gallon drum of gasoline just going up. He's shooting bullets at a metal, like an antenna. The shit falls, hits a tent, and that explodes like it was a fuel truck.
It's a 20 millimeter on the F-16, and the actual aircraft in the film is not armed with the pod that they refer to in the movie, but they made stuff sound cool at least.
Well, the thing that sounds the coolest in this movie, and Big D, you posted on our Twitter, on our Facebook, was a poll around the music. Like which film depicted the best Queen song? I didn't even know that was Queen, let alone that was a Walkman that he's strapping to his leg. Like, was that a thing? Could you buy that in the 80s? Could you buy an attachment? Or is that something that like fighter pilots wear on their legs to like keep their maps and stuff on there? Like, I didn't understand what the contraption was.
No, that's not standard issue. And for you to say you didn't know this was Queen,
I didn't know
Queen has done 4 soundtracks, and I mean, they're fucking kick-ass. They did the whole soundtrack for Flash Gordon. They did the whole soundtrack for Highlander. And then they had, Bohemian Rhapsody and Wayne's World. And then here, One Vision, without that song, this movie is not nearly as memorable. I think that song, everyone associates with it. And just when I'm about to check out in this movie, I'm like, oh my God, this fucking movie's 2 hours. It's dragging. It's not what I remember. When that shit comes on, I want to fucking fight somebody right now. Feel it. Woo!
You got snake on your brain, kid.
Come on. Gene, look at Gene bobbing his head. You can't fucking tell me that this doesn't fire you up. I want to join the Air Force.
I can't wait till we get demonetized on YouTube.
Yeah! Oh, that shit's so good.
Again, I had no idea that was Queen. I mean, it's a good song, don't get me wrong. But like, I don't know. I felt like had the Walkman just been used for that versus this recorded heart to heart, then maybe I would believe this movie a little bit more.
Yeah, they really overplayed this whole tape player motif. They wanted it to do everything. This was the omnibus device for the aircraft. I'm surprised at some point the cassette player didn't just start flying the aircraft itself. But you got a situation where you're making a contingency tape for Doug in case you get shot down or your aircraft is disabled. And I'm just thinking, he's a pilot, he's in the air, he's involved in combat. You want to keep his emotions in check. You want to keep his head on straight. Is a tape really the best idea for a guy in a dogfight? Does he really have time to just fly up and all the MiGs are going to leave him alone while he listens to it? And you had time to prep. Maybe instead of the jogging and going to Slappy's, maybe just tell Doug all this shit beforehand. Hey, here's the plan, kid. They could have cut all these heart-to-hearts that they did on the flight all the way from California to Bilia and saved about 20 minutes of a film that's already way too long.
But I like the fact that he hits play and it's immediately like, I must have died. This is what's happening. Thank God that Doug didn't preview the tape. But then also, this is like those choose your own adventures. The book where you would pick, do you enter the room or do you go left? And he stops the tape periodically through the flight. Chappy doesn't tell him to stop the tape. When he presses play the next time, it's like, well, they must have been over your right shoulder. Let's go take a look. How did they time this so perfect without prompts?
God, this movie is terrible, guys.
So good.
Again, I was watching the clock, and I've said this before on the podcast. When we do 90-minute movies, I get excited because I know no matter how bad the film is, it's only going to be 90 minutes. But at this one, I was constantly looking at like how much time was left, and at this point in the movie, there's still like 40 minutes left, and it's horrible. It's horrible. Well, before Doug lands his F-16, Colonel Masters is shot by a sniper, causing Doug to destroy the airbase and engulf the runway with napalm just to keep the army at bay while he lands and picks up his wounded father. Just as they take off, Doug and his father encounter another group of MiGs, led by Colonel Akir Nakesh, himself an ace pilot. The lone F-16 and Nakesh's MiG engage in a dogfight until a missile from Doug finishes off Nakesh. Doug's F-16 is pursued by other enemy MiGs when a squadron of U.S. Air Force F-16s appear, warning off the MiGs.
So my favorite part is, Colonel Ted Masters. He's a POW. He's been captured and whatever. You're not going to do a rescue without some ground troops, but he's in the back of that Jeep driving down the runway. And he's like, "Hey, Doug, I'm here. No shit, Dad. I can fucking see you. You're a combat veteran and you're waving like a kid coming back from summer camp. Hey, come on."
Well, it's at this point that because there's a lot of cockpit shots. I don't know if you got this, Big D, but did Doug's acting, the actor who played Doug, who's played by Jason Gedrick, I didn't know if you had the same feeling of believability in the way that he was flying that plane as you did with Hayden Christensen is supposedly piloting an X-Wing. Like, they have very similar approaches to acting in where it's like wooden. You don't believe anything that comes out of their mouth, and you don't even know if they know what this movie is. They just happen to be on screen, and they were casted strictly because of the way that they looked.
I felt like Jason Gedrick was a bootlegger budget Tom Cruise or Jason Patrick. They're like, let's go for that look, a little longer hair. And he does not look like he's in control of the plane. He's not a pilot. He's ridiculous. And he'll just periodically yell, "Dad!" No, not believable.
Chappy! One thing Doug doesn't have a problem doing, because he's a sociopath, is killing a lot of brown people.
Oh, no. Fuck it. But besides killing people, he has no problem. He has no, crisis of conscience here. He starts killing foreign nationals, and a lot of them. And you got to figure, yes, he's attacking some military installations, but there's civilians that are just working around the base, right? He doesn't even hesitate. He's a teenager killing dozens of people. Oh, and then for good measure, let's cause an ecological disaster. Let's go blow up $100 million oil refinery, killing all of its workers and just spilling the oil. Oh, I got no problem with this. Good job, Doug.
Now, this is where I knew the movie was fake, because there's no way the American military would ever allow a military plane to blow up an oil refinery in a Middle Eastern state. But this is where I started getting sympathy for the villains of the movie, because we talked about it in the beginning. Colonel Ted Masters was the aggressor. This state of Bilya is just trying to like you don't know what was going on in Bilya. Perhaps there was a lot of corruption, and this supposed ace fighter pilot general, he's not trying to get involved. He's not trying to coax the U.S. military into some sort of intervention, but everything that they're trying to make this country seem bad at, I'm like, no, actually, I think they might be in the right here. They're giving him food and water. They're not torturing him.
Yeah, they are. They
Right?
beat the shit out of him.
They beat the shit out of Ted Masters?
Yes. Well, remember they punched him in the stomach a bunch of times.
Oh, they punch him in the stomach. Whatever.
I admire the way you take pain. Tomorrow we see how you take death.
Yeah, but listen, the guy was aggressive coming into their country. He's the one that didn't adhere to international borders. All I'm saying is it doesn't seem like the state of Bilya is really that much of a threat to America, and a teenager going in and blowing up their infrastructure just seems a little wrong to me.
Well, he doesn't just blow up the infrastructure. He does some, I guess I would call it surgical bombing. Doug, it's not a terribly bad plan. It's true that Doug killed a lot of people, caused a minor ecological disaster, but it's not like the mission was complete malice. Let's remember, he's trying to save his dad, a guy that nobody in the world seems to care about, except for Doug and Chappy. And this mission has two phases. So if you're lost in all the action, although there isn't much of it, when they first enter Billion airspace, they got to knock out the Billion air defenses before they can go and actually rescue the Colonel. So we first see Doug use a cluster bomb on the initial target to knock out that runway, and that delays the MiGs from scrambling, along with just shooting them with the cannon and blowing a bunch up. So we see that you keep their planes out of commission, blow up their runway, they can't get off the ground. Now we get to the second target, and Doug drops this fictional bomb. It's called the Hades bomb, which is basically like napalm. Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to make a wall of fire that blocks personnel as he lands to rescue his father. And the movie shows us the Hades bomb. It's pretty impressive. Lots of fire. I like that in a movie. But then it just becomes like Keystone Cops. It's like these comical attempts to drive through the napalm. Like trucks drive through it and then suddenly they just flip over. And my favorite was the guys where they're like, okay, the truck failed. Hey, you with the motorcycle and the guy in the sidecar, you go through.
Yeah, it's laughable. And also, there's all kinds of continuity errors. The Hades is the red bomb that's under Doug's plane. After he drops it, when he lands, it's still on his plane. He then takes off later, and the Hades is missing. But that, when he finally, okay, so first the general sends they were like, was it 2 trucks?
There was a Jeep and a truck, I think, yes. And then the motorcycle.
Right. They flip over. So the next logical, thing to do is a motorcycle and sidecar.
Yeah.
They finally then send like this Mad Max vehicle through, and it makes it through. So Doug says, it's closing in on us. What are we going to do? Hey, Dad, can I fire the AGM-65 Maverick missile? And his dad goes, I don't know. We've never tried. He hits it. It fires this weapon, hits the truck, of course, blows the truck up. Yay, Dad. That ship would not work. Think about how these missiles work on fighter craft. You're flying through the air. So they actually drop off of the aircraft, then the engine ignites and they fly out. This would not work on the ground. It just would have dropped off and hit the ground. They have pressure sensors in the nose, so it would not have fired, but I think it would have been great if they just hit the button and it fell onto the runway and they were like, oh no.
What I don't get is that they have a motorcycle and they have trucks and you've got like a wall of fire. Couldn't you just drive around the wall of fire and not?
It's literally just on the other side of the runway.
Doug would have been like, fuck, God damn it, Chappy. I didn't think about this. But then also the F-16 now, again, terrible rescue vehicle. It's got to get out of there. And an F-16 needs 8,000 feet of runway. So that's like, let's say it's a mile, okay? Did you see a fucking mile of runway? They'd have to go back through the fire to get out.
No, and then also his dad does the old bit. He gets shot in the shoulder, but somehow now he can't walk or run. What's going on? You got shot in the shoulder. Why are you limping? Why are you struggling to get to the plane? You were just waving like, hey, it's me. And now you can't walk.
I mean, he did get punched in the stomach a bunch.
Right.
Maybe that had something to do with it.
Right.
But what I don't get is like Doug, kind of like Star Wars, Doug seems to be the only competent pilot in the entire Air Force. Chappy, shot down. Colonel Masters, he's backseat driving. Like, look, your ass got shot down. I'm not listening to you. He's trying to tell Doug what to do. And then finally, Major Smiley and the rescue squad, they all show up. And Smiley's all acting genteel, like he just saved the day. He's like, well, boys, I see you're outnumbered here. You might want to disengage. I think the Air Force needs to fire all these guys and just hire the entire Eagles Flying Club as like their aces, which I think might happen in Iron Eagle 3.
Well, while Colonel Masters is being treated for his wounds, Doug is reunited with Chappy, who apparently had ejected from his plane and was picked up. Seeing that punishing them would expose an embarrassing lapse in Air Force security, the panel forgoes prosecution as long as Doug and Chappy never speak of their operation to anyone. Chappy convinces the panel to grant Doug admission into the Air Force Academy. Days later, a plane assigned by the president returns to the U.S., reuniting Doug, Chappy, and Colonel Masters with family and friends.
Okay, so the court martial, the main reason that they want to let Doug go is because they're worried about, damage control. They got to keep this shit secret. What about the 15 other members of the fucking Eagles Club? What about all the knuckleheads on the Air Force Base that allowed this to happen? You're not going to just let him walk. You better lock them all up and throw away the key.
You mean Milo, the little serial killer with his those glasses look like it's something straight off of a Jeffrey Dahmer documentary.
Yeah.
Like his bowl cut, like, that guy is not going anywhere with his life. But again, if you were to compare something like this to recent trials and tribunals, I mean, like, what would you compare it to, Big D?
Well, I mean, they treat him like he's a hero. The reporters out there like, and there is, Reserve Colonel Chappy Sinclair. Rumor has it he was part of the planning, but we said, ha, that couldn't have happened.
Where's the news getting there?
Yeah, great.
This is like in Fox News and CNN watched this and they were like, you know what? This is the kind of coverage we need to start doing.
But Doug has done some really, really bad things. He stole a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Yeah. He's killed probably a couple hundred foreign nationals, including the Minister of Defense of a sovereign state of Belia. And of course, we forgot about the ecological disaster. I'm sure the oil company that owned that oil refinery is a bit pissed. It was probably BP or something like that.
Right.
But when it comes to the end here, everybody's treating him like he's a hero. I think there would have been some gigantic investigation. The chief of staff of the Air Force would have been removed. Every officer from the Wing King down would have retired with full benefits. I think the entire enlisted portion of that base and anybody who had a hand in this or allowed them, they'd be going to jail for 20 years. They'd be doing some hard-ass fucking labor like Rambo breaking rocks. They would not be having a parade.
I think the perfect ending of this movie would have been if they sentenced Doug to hang in 3 days. And it would have like, dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, to be continued. No, but this was definitely written and directed by a 12-year-old in some sort of fever dream that he had after, a 26-hour marathon session of playing Top Gun and drinking Mountain Dew. This movie is not good. It makes there's some things that you have to turn your brain off in movies like this. And then there's some things that just go too far and pass the believability scale or the believability test or whatnot. There is a term for this in movie making where the audience just checks out because none of your logic makes sense. And for me, there's just too much of that in this movie.
See, but I don't know. I think this works perfect. If you're trying to get young kids to join the military, we already heard people say they joined up because of this. This movie is like Gene and I were playing G.I. Joe, and we were going on a turn base. And I said, okay, I now fire my javelin missile, and here it comes. It is as ridiculous as it could be, but it's still stuck in people's memories. People remember and love this movie. And at the time, I read stories of how the entire theater was packed with people in uniform. The military loved this. They embraced it. They took it as they were celebrating them.
Oh, that's terrible. Because the entire time, like, there are people that are saying, no, we need to let diplomacy work. And they're like, fuck diplomacy. We need to go fuck some shit up. Fuck that. Yeah. America.
Fuck yeah.
Like, woo!
Democracy, Doug. Yeah, doesn't this make you want to spread democracy?
It makes me want to definitely spread some democracy over. Oh, jeez.
Oh, all right. So good. So good.
Well, now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, a 0 wipe movie is a perfect movie. A 5 wipe movie is one of the worst things you've ever seen in your entire life. We'll start with you, Gene. How many wipes do you give Iron Eagle?
Well, Raj, this movie had all the things that make a popular 80s movie. It had super kids, it had a race, had an awful soundtrack, an eccentric villain, black people who can dance, and terrible haircuts. There is nothing to hate about it, really. Like, it's pretty inoffensive and lightweight, even taking the care to change the name of Libya to Bilia. But the tone is all over the place. The script is horribly failing at being cool. Like, they tried to write up everybody's dialogue to make it cooler, and it sounded clunky and weird. The cassette tape motif, as you pointed out, Raj, was ridiculous, and it's way too long. A movie this mindless should be fun. Tighten it up, right? This should be less than an hour and a half. Maybe like Army of Darkness, 80 minutes would have been a real nice benchmark to go for. So for me, Top Gun was a 2 wipe movie. This is no Top Gun. It is below average. I'm coming in at 3 wipes.
3 wipes for you, Gene. Big D, how many wipes do you give?
So we always ask you, how does this movie hold up? Back in the 80s, this was a bad movie. Today, it's a bad movie. It held up. It held up to exactly what it was that I remembered. It's kind of a mix between Back to the Future and The Last Starfighter. Yeah, it's dumb. These service members wouldn't be able to steal classified material and intelligence, sabotage the supply chain, and then set off an entire series of events that led to the U.S. involved in an international incident. But as a kid, man, I loved this. This was something you'd want to go outside and play with your F-14. You'd go fly Top Gun. To me as a kid, this was more fun and more believable than Top Gun, even though it's ridiculous. It's awesomely bad. And my one gripe, both of you have said it, it is long. We get the point. Doug is reckless. We didn't need that 20-minute fly in the snake bit in the beginning. Cut down some of the tape. If it was shorter, man, this is a 1.5 wipe movie. But the way it is, I got to say it's a 2.5. It's average at best, and it's bordering closer to 3. But because of my sentimentality lenses and my glasses, I'm going to go with 2.5.
Oh, geez. I agree with both of your sentiments, only I'm going to go even more hard to the hoop on this than you guys are. I feel like the only thing that this had going for it is that Queen song. And I just don't know if that's enough to pull it out of an F-16 nosedive. I think this movie is one of the worst movies we've ever done on this podcast. And I know, I guess maybe that's the charm of this movie, but I didn't find anything charming about it other than like seeing some actors in other 80s movies that like you recognize and even, seeing Louis Gossett Jr. But the plot doesn't make sense. And I think for me, I know I'm supposed to put on movie lens and leave politics out of that, but it's tough for me to not think that at some point our federal government was paying Hollywood to make and release these kind of movies, because that's what governments around the world do.
Look, I might have a lot of criticism of the U.S. government, but I don't think anybody in the federal government were like, hey, yeah, we'll bankroll Iron Eagle. This seems like a great idea.
No.
That being said, even without all of that, the movie isn't good. The acting is high school theater level at the most. And the direction is shit. It's not even a fun one to go back and say it was enjoyable. So I apologize. I know this was a commissioned movie, and I know this is one of your favorites, but for me, it's a 5-wipe movie. It's not good. It's one of the, I did not get any enjoyment, and I was not looking forward to recording this podcast because I didn't think it was going to be a fun podcast, but it did end up being pretty fun because of your guys' enjoyment to this. So I enjoy talking about it with you guys, but I did not enjoy watching it because it is very long and quite boring in a lot of parts. And there's a lot of fat on this movie that could have been removed.
It's because you don't love America.
That's because I don't love America.
Fucking balls on this guy.
Exactly.
Giant balls.
It's like Zach says, you could fix anything in America with a shotgun, some duct tape.
That's right.
Fuck yeah. Harry Stamper, American hero.
Well, that being said, if you were to take 2.5 wipes, add 3 wipes and 5 wipes, and then divide by 3 to get our overall Shat score, what does that give us, Gene?
Raj, the average wipe score for Iron Eagle is 3.5 wipes.
And if we were to compare that against all the movies we've done here at Shat the Movies, Big D, where does that rank Iron Eagle in the pantheon of Shat?
So this is movie 130. And out of 130, this ties it in the 101st spot with A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dune, and Kindergarten Cop. It is better than Twisters and Porky's. It is worse than Weird Science and The Burbs.
There are some Dune fans out there whose heads just fucking exploded.
Dune's bad. Dune's bad.
I think I would much rather watch Twister than this movie.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking 0.17 difference. They're both guilty pleasures. They're both Taco Bell at 4 a.m. All
right. Well, that being said, now's the time of the podcast where we break out our shout outs and tell you what movie we're doing next. Gene, what's a shout out?
Raj, a shout out is our way of saying thank you for visiting our website, shatthemovies.com, and interacting with us. At the website, you can find out what movies are coming up, look at our past scores, listen to past podcasts, and vote for movies that you would like to see. Also, Big D has updated the site and is constantly updating the site, so now it's easier to get your shout out. It's also easier to commission films and to help support the podcast through contributions. So be sure to go check out shatthemovies.com. And while you're there, put your name in for a shout out. This week's shout outs go to Barack Obama, Christopher Allen Yerkes, Andy from Boners Lake, Wisconsin, Danny the Unicorn Chariot Driver, Anna, Yeti J Banana Esquire, Itamar, Ricardo from Melbourne, Australia, and Lucy K, Pelvic Meatloaf, Homeboy Fucked a Martian Once, Keith the Machinist, Film Joe 1, Prepper 5, Zach in New Hampshire, Ivana Strap-On, A Ham and Cheese Sandwich, Liquid Orwell, aka Low Fat Ken, The Cats Are Eating Through the Paper, Como Drew C, The Guy Who Knows His Fjords.
Oh, I remember him. Yeah.
Pertis Borg at Just Another TKO, Anton Smiler Gikel, Peter O'Halloran, Small D Dick Johnson, Nathan from Melbourne, Steve from Sydney, King of the Garganites, Matt from Saskatchewan, and Shane. Thanks, everyone, for your shout-outs. Again, if you want to hear your name on the podcast, just go to shatthemovies.com, explore all the fun things there are to do there, and get your name in for a shout-out. Back to you, Raj.
Thanks. Big D, we got another commission coming up for next week's podcast, correct?
We do. And next week's commission was from Emmett Clark. And I want to give a follow-up to last week. We played the voicemail from Brody from Belfast.
Uh-huh.
Adorable.
She was our 10-year-old listener who liked The Nightmare Before Christmas. The outpouring of affection that we got for Brody, Emmett Clark, who commissioned next week's movie, also dropped us $200 and said, I want to sponsor and commission The Nightmare Before Christmas for Brody.
Oh, that's super sick. That's awesome.
It makes me feel like I wrote back and I said, Emmett, I feel like my faith in humanity is restored, that our podcast has been able to bring good people from around the world. That somebody from, I think Emmett's from California, somebody from California would be touched so much that they dropped $200 for a girl in Belfast who enjoyed a movie that she wasn't sure whether it was about Christmas or Halloween. Brody's over the moon, her mother said, the fact that we're going to do her movie and that somebody cared enough about her to do it. So it's nice, and I want to thank our listeners, because the best thing that we can get out of this is that we connect good people, and we've built a lot of friendships, and hearing from everybody, it's the most important thing to us. So thank you very much. And with that being said, we're going to release that. We've pushed our schedule a little different. It's going to come out the week before Christmas.
Oh, fun.
And I was going to talk to you guys. I think we should try to do part of the podcast PG so that she can actually listen to the whole thing.
So I was actually thinking about that. I think that we should pick alternative curse words and also have some sort of maybe like jingle bells or some sort of a sound effect that when we do let them slip, we can cover it right up.
Right. Cover them up with the jingle bells. That's right.
Okay. I think we'll do that. But either way, we want, Brody to be able to listen to her cast. And next week, the movie that Emmett had originally commissioned is about Harris K. Telemacher has the easiest job in the world. He's a TV weatherman in Los Angeles, where the weather is so predictable he tapes his forecast days in advance. Bored with his job, his life, and his relationship with long-term girlfriend Trudy, Harris begins to receive secret messages from an electronic freeway sign near his home, which leads him to pursue romance with a British journalist and vapid young model. It was commissioned again by Emmett. It was released in February of 91. I've never seen it. I don't know anybody else has ever seen it. So it should be interesting.
I've seen this movie, but it's been a long time. It was like a favorite of my parents growing up because they were huge fans of the lead actors in this movie. So I've seen it, but it was one of those money pit situations where I didn't really understand it because I was too young to, I guess, understand the gravity of what it's like to feel like your life is a failure.
Yeah, and shout out to Emmett for having the faith in us after hearing us do other romantic comedies. To still allow us to do another one is a really bold step.
No, man, Harry Met Sally was a good one. Harry Met Sally was one of our good ones.
there was a lot of crying that went on behind the scenes, and when Harry Met Sally, there were some breakthroughs. I think I kind of feel like if you're going through something in life with a partner, pull up that episode and see if that can't help you out.
Yeah, it was a great one for Big D. Like, that one was a breeze.
I was a therapist. It wasn't great for me, but it made Gene and I's relationship stronger.
That's true.
We had a breakthrough that day.
I'm just glad I wasn't on it. I'm glad I steered way clear of that ship. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow the handle at Shat the Movies. We're also on Facebook. Just search for Shat the Movies there. You can also find all of our information on our website, including voting and getting your shout outs on shatthemovies.com. You can also support the podcast multiple different ways via PayPal or Venmo for commissions, or you can shop on Amazon via our affiliate link where we get pennies for every purchase that you make there. Not that we're supporting Amazon. We just want you to support us. That being said, you can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Westworld. You can find all the information on our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Chappy Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie commissioned review. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
Rather than do an interview with me, which would be fascinating, by the way, I thought that possibly I'd take you on a, kind of a cultural tour of LA.
Look how he's painted the blouse, sort of translucent. You can just make out her breast underneath it. When I see a painting like this, I must admit I get a little emotionally erect.
Bon appetit.
See, I'm done already, and I don't remember eating.
What's his girlfriend's name? Sheila. She's the one who's always kissing everyone hello. I hate that. I'm not kissing anyone hello anymore. Hi! You can be
How was I in the meeting?
You were good. Any advice?
Sure. Skipping. Skipping is the perfect compromise between running and walking. It looks too desperate if you run to a meeting.
What, she's seeing someone else?
Yes, she's going away with him.
So go away with me.
I can't. Don't you see? I would just be using you to get even with her for going away with someone else.
I don't mind.
Let's go.
Great.
Woo!
Steve Martin.
Did you know that the same technology used to clean up the Alaskan oil spill can also suck fat from your thighs and chin?
LA Story.
I'll have a decaf coffee.
I'll have a decaf espresso.
I'll have a double decaf cappuccino.
Do you have any decaffeinated coffee ice cream?
I'll have a half double decaffeinated half cap with a twist of lemon.
I'll have a twist of lemon.
I'll have a twist of lemon. Yeah, I'll have a twist of lemon.
I'll have a twist of lemon.
I'll have a twist of lemon.